Have you ever wondered what happens when a killer doesn't act alone? When evil isn't just one man, but a group united by a twisted belief in murder? In a quiet town in Australia, where snow never falls despite its name, 11 lives were stolen. Their bodies weren't buried, but sealed inside barrels of acid, hidden in plain sight. This wasn't just a killing spree. It was a nightmare that lasted nearly a decade. Welcome to File X, where we uncover the darkest case files. And today, we begin with Snowtown. Snowtown, a tiny town in South Australia, home to less than 500 people. Its name suggests snow, yet snow has never fallen here. The atmosphere is quiet, almost frozen in time. It's the kind of place you'd never expect horror to take root. But from 1992 to 1999, over 7 quiet years, a series of disappearances and murders took place. The most terrifying part? No one knew. No one asked questions. No one suspected. Because the killers didn't come from outside. They were living right among the townspeople. When police finally unlocked an old abandoned bank building in the heart of the town, they had no idea they were about to uncover one of the most horrifying secrets in Australian criminal history. Behind that steel door were 8 barrels, and in each barrel was a body, or parts of one, dissolving in sulfuric acid. Why were they there? Who killed them? And why did the town remain silent for so long? To understand this case, we must go back to the beginning, to a man named John Bunting, a self-proclaimed punisher of society. File X will take you inside the mind of a killer, cunning, cold, and ruthless, who recruited accomplices, manipulated them, and turned murder into a financial operation. This wasn't just murder. This was organized evil. To understand how one man could murder 11 people and remain undetected for nearly a decade, we must step into his mind. John Justin Bunting, born in 1966, once worked at a slaughterhouse where he learned how to kill without blinking. But what made him truly dangerous wasn't brute strength. It was a twisted belief that society needed to be cleansed. In his mind, there were only 2 kinds of people: those who deserved to live and those who needed to be eliminated. He especially despised pedophiles, homosexuals, and people he saw as weak or useless. And he didn't just talk, he acted. In Bunting's bedroom, police later found a war wall filled with photos, names, and addresses of his targets. Red yarn connected each person like a web of death. The question is, how did one man with radical beliefs carry out so many murders? The answer: he didn't act alone. Bunting recruited young, impressionable men. He didn't need the smart ones, he needed the loyal. That's where 3 names enter the picture: Robert Wagner, James Vlasakis, and Mark Hayden. From this point on, Bunting wasn't just a killer. He became the leader of a covert network where murder was seen as a sacred duty. These men didn't just kill on command. They started to believe they were doing the right thing. And to keep their loyalty, Bunting didn't just use words, he used money. Each victim wasn't just cleansed, but also harvested, their identities stolen to continue drawing government welfare payments. John Bunting's crimes didn't happen in the shadows. They took place in living rooms, kitchens, and basements, among people who called each other mates. And the most horrifying part? They laughed while doing it. The first known victim was a 22-year-old man named Clinton Trezise. John Bunting killed him with a hammer after a brutal interrogation in which he accused Clinton of being a pedophile without any real evidence. The murder happened in 1992, but Clinton's body wasn't discovered until 1994, shallowly buried in the backyard of a house in Lower Light. At the time, police had no leads. To them, it was a standalone murder. But to Bunting, it was a test run, a way to see how killing felt, how to dispose of a body, and how far he could go. After Clinton, the list grew longer, not just for ideology, but for profit. Bunting began targeting people who lived off welfare, vulnerable individuals, often mentally ill or socially isolated. He and his accomplices would torture victims to extract PIN codes, impersonate them to drain their bank accounts, and even record their voices to trick welfare authorities into thinking they were still alive. One of the most heartbreaking cases was Frederick Brooks, just 18 years old, the son of Vlasakis' girlfriend. Fred was lured to a house, then tied up, beaten, electrocuted on his genitals, and eventually strangled to death. His body was stuffed into a barrel, covered in acid, and left to decompose. What's chilling? After his murder, the killers kept Fred's phone, sent fake texts, and even called his family, pretending he was still alive. The killings became systematic, like a deadly business. The locations changed, from private homes to motels to garages. But the method remained consistent: interrogate, torture, rob, kill, dispose, assume the identity. And all of it happened while the community remained completely unaware. By 1999, John Bunting and his accomplices had murdered at least 11 people. But they ran into a logistical problem. You can't keep hiding bodies in your house forever. Their solution? An abandoned bank building in Snowtown. A former branch, closed for years. No one could have imagined that behind the steel door of the vault, a body bank was being built. Inside, they stored 8 industrial plastic barrels, the kind used for chemicals. Each barrel contained a corpse or body parts, decomposing in sulfuric acid and industrial cleaners. The stench was overpowering. So much so that a nearby resident once reported a rotting smell like something dead, but no one investigated. When police finally raided the building in May 1999, they were utterly horrified. The barrels had swollen from decomposition gases, and some were leaking fluids and flesh. Nearby were tools of torture: pliers, hammers, ropes, cassette tapes, with recorded screams and moans of the victims. In total, 8 bodies were recovered from the bank vault, and 3 more from other locations. One detail haunted investigators for years. Some victims were forced to make phone calls after death, with pre-recorded messages mimicking their voices, fooling welfare services into believing they were still alive. And the most heartbreaking of all, James Vlasakis, one of the accomplices, murdered his own half-brother, just to please Bunting. On May 21, 1999, South Australia police launched the largest arrest operation in the state's history. John Bunting, Robert Wagner, Mark Hayden, and James Vlasakis were all taken into custody. When brought in for questioning, the room fell into total silence, until James Vlasakis began to talk. Just 20 years old, Vlasakis had witnessed and participated in at least 4 murders. But what made him the key to the case was his betrayal of Bunting, the man who had treated him like a son. Over the course of 12 days, Vlasakis confessed every gruesome detail: names, methods, roles, and body locations. Police were stunned to learn that most of the murders had been meticulously planned in Bunting's mind, with no written evidence. The trial began in October 2001 and lasted nearly 12 months, involving over 250 witnesses, 60 hours of torture tapes, and horrifying images from inside the barrels. It became the longest and most complex serial murder trial in Australian history. When sentencing was delivered, John Bunting and Robert Wagner received 11 consecutive life sentences without parole. Vlasakis was given 4 life sentences but a reduced term for cooperation. Mark Hayden, though not a direct killer, received 7 years for his role as an accomplice. But for many in Snowtown, no sentence could erase the trauma. Because the killers weren't monsters from somewhere else, they were neighbors, friends, and familiar faces they once trusted. Snowtown, a town of less than 500 people, was once so quiet it felt forgotten. But after 1999, the name became forever linked to Australia's most horrifying serial murders. The bank where 8 bodies were found was shut down, but memories can't be locked away. Many residents moved out. Storefronts were stripped bare. The media swarmed like vultures. For locals, shame eclipsed grief. People asked, how could such horror hide in plain sight? The brutal answer: no one asked the hard questions. For nearly 7 years, Bunting and his crew murdered people within the heart of society, and no one noticed. They faked voices, stole identities, acted as if their victims were alive. And the system believed them. Psychologists call it community blindness. When something is too horrific to believe, we choose not to believe. Since then, the Snowtown Murders have been turned into books, films, documentaries. But every version carries the same haunting truth. Monstrosity doesn't always wear horns. It often looks human, acts normal, and justifies evil with belief. For those who investigated the case, attended the trials, or lost someone they loved, Snowtown isn't just a case file, it's a collective scar. And maybe the biggest lesson, beyond the acid barrels, the impersonations, and the years of silence, is this: sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't death, it's when a community's silence allows evil to thrive.